Did you really think this deck was dead? Think again, chucklenuts. So the new Duelist Cup happened really recently in Master Duel, and while it's an atrocious event, I am not going to go into that right now. There's something that happened that will surprise some people. Floo did good, like absurdly good. Out of all top 100 decks, it took not only the same number of spots as branded, but it actually had a better distribution. 2 Floo decks, I think 3 Floo decks were in top 10, meanwhile only 1 branded deck made it into the top 10, and most branded decks are concentrated between the 50 and the 90 mark. Meanwhile, Floo spread out everywhere, with the first 3 decks being in the top 10, which is really good. Hell, not even Runic did as good. It only had 9 of the top spots, and people were probably really afraid of it. So, what gives? To understand why floowandereeze is doing so good in the current metagame, especially in the Duelist Cup, we need to understand what it even does, because some people might need a little bit of a recap, because all they really remember is Barrier Statue Pass, and well, that's dead. So the floowandereeze deck is basically like Yosenju Monarchs, in a sense. It normal summons during your opponent's turn, it normal summons as its main gimmick, and it also does it in little chains, right? All your small birds have an effect where they can normal summon themselves, they can use an effect like banishing cards in the graveyard or searching for a big or a small bird, but then they can also in resolution of that normal summon into another winged beast. So provided you have another one in your hand, which in most cases you do, you can then just do it again, and then do it again, and then, well, I think you can see where this is going. You can use normal summon chains from your Robina and Eaglin to go into M-Pen, go into DD Crow, go into literally anything, or Barrier Statue when it was legal, and that's kind of where the deck gets a lot of its power from. Well, the deck really just achieves multiple interruptions via M-Pen. Because if you don't remember, this card is a floodgate for Link monsters, practically speaking. It also forces your opponent into defense position if they want to use special summoned monsters effects, like Baguska, sort of. It's a searcher that's not once per turn, and it's also battle modulation, so you can get over practically anything as long as it has no immunity. So you're trying to normal summon this thing multiple times to add your traps and to add your spell, which allows you to tribute your opponent's cards for your own gain, which includes spells and traps, which is absurd. And depending on how many you're able to get off, if you have multiple of the Dreaming Towns in rotation, you basically normal summon chain into big birds multiple times during your opponent's turn, which means if you summon an Apex Avian with 1 trap and then use its effect to bounce itself to negate, you could just effectively do it again as long as you have an appropriate Floo name in your hand. Plus, having multiple M-Pens is always fun. That basically kind of guarantees you 2 searches for spell traps. And of course, who could forget D-Shifter, probably the most absurd card in the deck, period. I mean, it's not even a Floo card, but it's associated with Floo so much that people just think it's a bird at this point. Again, if you don't know what it does, it just basically sends all cards to the engrave to banish pile instead if you have none in the graveyard anyways, and Floo literally doesn't care about the graveyard, so you can always fire this off and expect to have good returns. Plus, if you have some consistency spells like the pots sent to the graveyard because they're spells and they go to the graveyard, you could always use a Floo name like Stree to banish it and then just use Shifter anyways, so it's always useful. The deck also has some really interesting options from the extra deck. Now, you're locked out of special summoning during the turn you use Floo effects, but you can always, on the crackback, when you go into another turn and haven't done anything yet, special summon instead. You can go into things like the trains, which I don't have all of them yet. You can go into Zeus lines with Assemble Nightingale, or use any other level 1 Winged Beast monster or rank 1 Winged Beast monster. You can also make Link monsters like Underworld Goddess, because if you can't get over something because it's unaffected, just make Underworld Goddess by stalling out. The deck can survive for lots of turns, seriously. So while I've explained how the deck of floowandereeze even works, I didn't really explain why it's so good right now in particular. So I guess let's get that sorted. First of all, Runic is the big problem with the format, even though there was a lack of Runic decks in top 100 compared to Floo, of course. And the reason why it's such an important factor is because Floo has a really good Runic matchup. See, Runic banishes shit from the top of your deck, but you kind of like that. In fact, cards in your deck, Gold Sark, fucking map, you want to banish certain things. And well, when some things are banished, you can always just normal summon a Winged Beast and then they all come back to hand, right? Or at least you can token to get back row that you need, or M-Pens, of course. Now, of course, the whole token recur things isn't, it's exclusive to Floos, so you can't use it to get back your Rises or your Apex Avians, but, you know, it's a trade-off, and I think it's a fair trade-off at that. The second reason is that, well, because Runics were so anticipated, people either teched to play against them or just mentally weren't prepared for something like Floo. And lastly but not least, this is best of 1, man. Best of 1, you lose to like a couple of disruptions, your opponent's smart about it, Floo's kind of rewarding you for that. It is what it is. All I can say is that it is the next best budget option to play, especially since you can pick up shifters before before Tears arrive, which isn't a while, but it's in a while that's really soon. Latest.